They say silence is your greatest weapon. But what if I told you that silence is also their greatest fantasy? What if your absence doesn't make them chase you, but makes them romanticize you? And while you sit there wondering if they even noticed you're gone, they're building an entire dream around you, safe, distant, untouchable, just the way they like it. But here's the part they never see coming. When you go no contact, and actually mean it, when your silence isn't a strategy but a boundary, everything inside them starts to break. Not all at once, quietly, slowly, tragically, because the version of you they kept on a shelf in their mind is gone. And now they're not in control anymore. This video is not what you think it is. It's not about games. It's not about making someone miss you. It's about what actually happens inside the mind of an avoidant when the person they pushed away finally walks out and stays out. You're going to hear truths no one talks about. The kind of truths that make you question everything you thought you knew about love, power, silence, and walking away with your dignity intact. Because this isn't just about them. It's about you reclaiming your voice without ever having to speak. And by the end of this video, you won't be waiting for a text, hoping for closure, or wondering what they're thinking. You'll know, you'll understand, and most importantly, you'll be free. So if you're ready to stop chasing answers and start owning your power, keep watching. Because what avoidants hope for when you go no contact is the exact reason you must never look back. When you go no contact with an avoidant, most people assume they'll feel the sting of your absence, that they'll finally realize what they lost, reflect deeply, and maybe even come running back with newfound clarity. But the truth is far more layered and darker. Avoidants don't immediately feel the pain of your distance the way a securely attached person might. In fact, they often feel a strange relief, not because they didn't care, but because now they're back in a space where they don't have to deal with the vulnerability of emotional closeness. You've removed the stimulus that triggered their fear, your love, your intimacy, your consistency. But here's the twist. When you're no longer present, you don't just disappear from their emotional world. You become an idea, a concept they can control, a memory they can manipulate to their comfort. You stop being the complex, real, flawed person they were struggling to handle in real time, and you start becoming the fantasy version of you they can now admire from a safe emotional distance. Your absence is not just your silence. It becomes their permission to reimagine you in a way that doesn't challenge them. This is what most people don't understand about avoidance. They struggle to hold the tension between wanting love and fearing what love demands of them. So when you're gone, you become less threatening. They no longer have to deal with your emotional needs, your truth, your closeness. And that makes you ideal, not because you've changed, but because they've reduced you to a version that lets them stay emotionally detached while still feeling connected. That version of you never gets angry, never asks for more, never confronts them with their emotional inadequacies. That version of you stays frozen in time, beautiful, sweet, mysterious, and most importantly, safe. The fantasy they construct in your absence is always cleaner than the reality they ran from. They miss that version, the one who smiled at their charm, who didn't press too hard, who disappeared before they had to make a decision. The avoidant doesn't miss your real connection, they miss the control. They miss the narrative where they weren't the one who failed. And so in the silence, they recreate you in their mind not as you are, but as they needed you to be to avoid facing themselves. But here's the danger for you. If you don't understand this dynamic, you'll think their sudden longing means growth. You'll interpret their emotional reappearance as transformation, but it's not. It's memory, it's projection. It's longing without responsibility, and that's not love. That's emotional preservation. They haven't changed. They've simply found a version of you they can love without fear, because that version no longer asks anything of them. The longer you're gone, the more perfect you become in their mind. And ironically, the less equipped they are to ever handle the real you again. Don't confuse romanticization with reconciliation. They don't want you back, they want a version of you that never existed. The moment you go no contact, something interesting happens inside the mind of an avoidant. At first, they may appear indifferent, they might even seem relieved, but underneath that calm surface, a quiet expectation begins to build. They're not assuming it's over, they're assuming it's temporary. Deep down, they believe you're going to reach out again. Why? Because you always have. Avoidants become conditioned to a pattern, one where you pursue and they retreat, where you express and they withhold, where you come back and they stay safely distant. It becomes a psychological game of tug-of-war where they don't have to pull, because they know you'll keep tugging. Your need for connection becomes their safety net, and in that dynamic, they're always emotionally in control. So when you go silent, the first thing they do isn't panic, it's wait. Wait for the signal that they're still wanted, that they still matter, that their silence hasn't pushed you too far. Because for the avoidant, control is everything. They're not looking for intimacy, they're looking for reassurance without responsibility. They want the comfort of being desired without the discomfort of being truly seen. What they secretly hope for when you go no contact is not your disappearance, but your return on their timeline, on their terms, without demands, without hard conversations, without the emotional accountability that real love requires. And every day that passes without hearing from you, they both crave and dread the next message, because it means the power dynamic they've grown comfortable with is still intact. They don't want the relationship back. What they want is proof that you haven't truly left, that they still have access, that you're still emotionally orbiting them, even if from a distance. Because if you reach out, they don't have to examine their behavior. They don't have to grow. Your message lets them breathe easy. Ah, they're still there. I'm still safe. That's the real payoff they seek, not love, not depth, not transformation certainty without risk. But here's what changes the entire game. The moment you don't return, the moment the silence isn't a tactic, but a boundary, when your absence doesn't end with another emotional breadcrumb, but becomes a line they can no longer cross, that's when the avoidant begins to unravel, because now the story doesn't end the way they expected. And for the first time, they're forced to confront what they never had to before: real loss. Not the kind that sparks panic and drives them back to you overnight, but the kind that lingers. The kind that makes them wonder, why didn't they reach out? Did I push too far? Were they actually serious this time? That discomfort is what they've spent their whole life avoiding. But your silence, firm, grounded, final, is the one thing they can't manipulate. So if you're tempted to break no contact just to see if they still care, remember this: they're hoping you will. Not because they've changed, but because they haven't. Silence isn't just distance. When done right, it becomes power. What avoidants never expect is that you'll actually stay gone. That your silence won't just be a short-lived tactic, but a turning point. Because once you stop playing the role they've cast you in, the one where you always reach back out, always hold the emotional thread, they start to lose the illusion they built around you. And what makes that so devastating for them isn't just that you've stopped reaching out, it's that you've stepped out of their control. For the avoidant, control is their protection. They keep their emotional world tightly sealed, not because they don't feel, but because feeling terrifies them. They've built an entire coping system around the idea that if they don't let anyone all the way in, they can't be hurt. So when someone like you finally gets close, really close, it activates every alarm in their system. The only way to turn it off is to push you away. But here's the thing: they push with the assumption that you'll still be there, still waiting, still hoping, still aching in the background. That's where your silence becomes their crisis, not because they suddenly realize how much they love you, but because they no longer get to dictate the story. The version of you they romanticized is gone. The fantasy has shattered. Now, you're not just the one who got too close. You're the one who left. And that, to an avoidant, is their worst fear. Not closeness, not intimacy, but abandonment. Because abandonment confirms the very belief they've carried since childhood, that no one stays, that love equals pain, that if someone sees the real them, they'll walk away. And when you don't come back, when you resist the urge to chase, to explain, to soften the blow for them, like you always have, that's when the panic sets in, because now they don't just miss you. They're faced with the reality that someone saw their mess, stood in it, offered love, and then chose to walk away anyway. That's the mirror they can't avoid. That's the truth they can't manipulate. This is the moment where growth could happen. But only if they're willing to sit with that discomfort, to stop blaming everyone else, and to finally ask themselves, why do I keep running from the very thing I say I want? But whether they grow or not isn't your job. Your silence isn't a tool to teach them. It's a declaration of your own worth. It's a boundary forged not from resentment, but from self-respect. They thought silence would be easy. They thought your distance would give them space to breathe. But it gave them something else: consequences. So let them sit with the silence they thought they wanted, because that silence, that stillness, it speaks the loudest truth of all. You were never theirs to control.